She fell into my room at midnight and begged, "Make me yours." Midnight. The kind of midnight that makes silence heavy, that makes shadows lean against the walls and wait. Jeremy's room was quiet, except for the ticking of the old clock above his desk. He had been dozing, half lost in a restless dream, when the sound came. A sharp crack, like glass breaking from nowhere. Jeremy's eyes snapped open. His breath froze as he turned toward the window. It was closed, curtains drawn tight, yet something was there, a shimmer, like light bending in a way it shouldn't. Then in a sudden collapse of air, a figure fell through, as though reality itself had ripped apart just long enough to let her through. She landed on the floor with the grace of someone not bound by gravity. Jeremy scrambled up, his heart slamming against his ribs. He expected an intruder, a thief, some nightmare crawling out of the dark. But what he saw was unlike anything his mind could explain. Her skin seemed to hold starlight, faintly glowing in soft silver tones. Long strands of hair cascaded down her shoulders, shifting between shades, like liquid fire that couldn't decide if it wanted to be flame or water. And her eyes that seemed far too old, far too knowing, burned with desperation. She looked at him, and before he could speak, her voice cracked through the air, sharp but pleading. "Make me yours just before they find me." Jeremy stood frozen. The words echoed in his head, louder than his racing heartbeat. Who was she? What did she mean? Before he could shape even a single question, the figure stepped closer. Every movement was both human and not, delicate, yet weighted with something beyond flesh and bone. Her presence made the air electric, as though the room itself was holding its breath. Jeremy backed toward the wall. What are you talking about? Who are you?" She lowered her gaze, her chest rising and falling, as though each breath cost her strength she didn't have to spare. Then she lifted her eyes again, and in that single glance, Jeremy saw a story too large to fit inside any human life. Fear, longing, exile, it was all there, carried like a secret she could no longer contain. "My name is Helen," she said, her voice a trembling melody, "and I don't have much time." Jeremy tried to laugh, tried to dismiss it as some hallucination. Maybe he was still dreaming. Maybe he had finally snapped from too many sleepless nights and too much bottled loneliness. But no dream ever felt this sharp, this alive. No dream ever smelled of strange blossoms, carried in on the air around her. Her steps brought her closer, close enough for him to see the faint symbols glowing faintly on her skin, markings that shifted like constellations across a night sky. And though every instinct told him to run, to shout, to fight, something else rooted him in place. Curiosity, and something deeper, something nameless, that stirred inside him at her presence. She stopped only a breath away, her voice dropping to a whisper that was more command than request. "They'll come for me soon. If they see me here, they'll destroy us both. But if you accept me, if you make me yours, they cannot take me back." Jeremy blinked, trying to process her words. Make her his? What did that even mean? Marriage? Ownership? Something stranger? Questions swarmed his mind, but none found their way to his tongue. All he could do was stare, his pulse roaring in his ears, as if the universe itself had decided to trespass into his room tonight. The clock ticked, 1 second, then another. And Jeremy realized something terrifying. This was not a dream, not a trick, not even madness. This was real. The girl, no, the being, who had fallen into his room at midnight was real. And her request was only the beginning of something far larger than he could imagine. Jeremy's throat tightened as the silence stretched. He wanted to deny everything. The silver glow of her skin, the alien script etched faintly across her arms, the way her presence bent the air around her like invisible gravity. But denial felt thin, fragile. The stranger, Helen, stood trembling before him, her gaze darting toward the dark corners of the room, as if unseen eyes were watching. Finally, she steadied herself, then fixed him with a stare so intent it seemed to pin him to the floor. "I am not what you believe me to be," she began, voice low but unshaking. "Not a thief, not a dream, not a ghost. My world lies beyond the folds of your night sky. Jeremy's laugh broke from him like a shield. Right. Sure. An alien fell into my room. That makes sense. He rubbed his eyes hard, pressing his palms into his sockets. This is a nightmare. It has to be. But when he dropped his hands, she hadn't vanished. She was still there, closer now, her outlines shimmering as though she wasn't bound to this world at all. You're not dreaming, Helen whispered. I crossed through a tear that was never meant to open. I should not be here, Jeremy. But if I had not come, I would already be gone. Jeremy froze. Gone. Hunted, she said, her tone heavy with the weight of that single word. My people do not forgive disobedience. They see independence as rebellion. I was born into a chain I refuse to wear. The room seemed smaller with her words, the walls pressing in as Jeremy tried to absorb them. Hunted, chains, rebellion. None of it belonged in his quiet, ordinary life. None of it made sense, and yet every instinct screamed that she spoke the truth. Why me? His voice cracked, raw. Why my room? Why not anyone else? For the first time, Helen's expression softened. Vulnerability, unmasked and sharp, flickered in her glowing eyes. Because you are not anyone. I chose you. His chest tightened. You don't even know me. I do, she whispered, not in the way you think. I felt you before I ever saw you. I felt the resonance in your blood, in the rhythm of your body. Your energy calls to mind, Jeremy. It anchors me. It shelters me. He shook his head, backing toward the bed as if distance could smother the storm swelling inside him. That's impossible. I'm just a guy. I work. I sleep. I'm nobody. You are not nobody, she said, and her voice carried a strange music, each syllable wrapping around him like warmth against the cold. Among billions, only you align with me. Only you can shield me. With you, I can resist their pull. Without you, her breath trembled. Without you, I cannot survive here. Jeremy stared, his thoughts colliding like shards of glass. Resonance, energy, survive. None of it belonged to the world he knew, yet it felt more real than anything he'd ever touched. The air crackled between them, alive with a strange current. He realized with a jolt that the light bulb above them was flickering, dimming and brightening in time with his heartbeat. What's happening? He whispered. Helen lowered her gaze. The bond, she admitted. Even unspoken, it grows. When I came to you, it awakened. Do you not feel it? Jeremy pressed a hand against his chest. His pulse thudded hard, too steady, too synchronized with something outside himself. His breath came shallow, and yet he felt alive, intensely, unnervingly alive, as though every nerve in his body had awakened from slumber. This isn't real, he muttered, shaking his head. It can't be real. It is. Her voice broke, no longer a command but a plea. I would not beg if it were not. I broke the laws of my kind to come here. I severed myself from everything I have ever known, because I could not bear to let them decide my fate. And now, her shoulders sagged, the weight of her words dragging her down. Now I am nothing unless you accept me. Her glow dimmed faintly, like a dying ember. The sight startled him, this being of starlight, unraveling before his eyes. He stepped forward despite himself. You're serious, he murmured. Helen met his gaze, tears shimmering along her strange, luminous lashes. More serious than life itself. They are already hunting me. Their ships scour the sky even now. If they find me without the bond, I will be torn back across the void. But if you bind me to you, Jeremy, they cannot take me. Not without tearing this world apart. Jeremy's chest tightened, fear blooming in his stomach. Aliens, hunters, ships. It was madness. Yet the way she trembled, the way her skin dimmed as though fading, made it impossible to dismiss. He wanted to reject it, to cling to reason. But another part of him, the part that had always dreamed there was more beyond the dull edges of his life, leaned toward her. Why would you risk everything? He asked softly. For me? Helen's lips curved, not in a smile but in something raw. Because where I come from, choice is forbidden. Every union is arranged, every path decided. I wanted freedom, Jeremy. I wanted to choose. And when I searched across the stars, I found you. You are my choice. His breath hitched. The simplicity of her words sliced through the chaos. She had crossed light years, broken laws, risked death, all for choice, all for him. Still, the human part of him rebelled. This sounds like destiny, fate. It's too much. I'm not special enough for this. Helen stepped closer, close enough for him to see the faint crackle of light beneath her skin. She raised her hand, hesitated, then touched his arm. The contact burned, not painfully, but with a rush of warmth that surged straight to his chest. You are, she whispered, and you will see it, even if you do not believe yet. The room shuddered faintly, as though her touch had shifted something deeper than air. Jeremy's breath came fast. His doubts screamed louder than ever, but his body betrayed him. Because the moment her hand touched him, the truth anchored itself inside him. This was no dream. This was no madness. This was Helen, an exile, a rebel, an alien woman who had fallen into his life with desperation, in her eyes and a plea on her lips. And whether he liked it or not, their fates were already entwined. The silence stretched again, thick and waiting. Jeremy finally exhaled, his voice barely a whisper. What happens? If I say yes? Helen's eyes glowed brighter, like twin stars igniting. Then neither of us will ever be alone again. And for the first time in his life, Jeremy wasn't sure if that promise was salvation or doom. The room felt different now, charged, alive. Jeremy stood motionless, his arm tingling where her hand had touched him, his chest still struggling to catch up with the rhythm she had imposed on his heart. He should have been afraid, should have shoved her away, should have screamed for help. Instead, he found himself staring at her with a pull he couldn't fight, as if some invisible thread had knotted itself between them. Helen let her hand linger for only a breath longer before withdrawing, her eyes clouded with something he couldn't quite name. Relief, perhaps, or sorrow, or both. She moved toward the window, her gaze lifting to the dark sky beyond the curtains. My world, she began, her voice low, distant, is not like yours. It is beautiful, yes, but beauty there is a prison. Every color, every star, every sound. Controlled. Our lives are designed before we take our first breath. We are told who to serve, who to bond with, even the moment we must die. Jeremy swallowed, his throat dry. That sounds like hell. Her lips twitched at the word, a faint smile ghosting across her face. To us, it is tradition. To me, it was suffocation. I was born into a family that prized obedience above all else. I should have bowed. I should have bent. But something in me resisted. Every command they gave me felt like a cage tightening around my soul. So I broke their rules. I dreamed of freedom. She turned, her glowing eyes locking onto his. Do you know what they do to dreamers in my world, Jeremy? He shook his head slowly. They erase them. Not just their bodies, but their essence. They wipe every trace until it is as if the dreamer never existed at all. No memories, no history, no name whispered in mourning. Nothing. That was to be my fate. The words struck him like a blow. For a moment, he forgot she wasn't human, forgot the strange glow of her skin, forgot the way the air bent around her. She was just someone who had been punished for wanting to live her own life, someone who had clawed her way out of chains to stand in his room at midnight. Jeremy's chest tightened. You were alone. Yes. Her voice cracked, the single syllable trembling with pain. So terribly alone. Until I found you. He wanted to look away, to break free from the intensity of her gaze. But he couldn't. The weight of her confession pressed against him, and with it, something else rose inside him. An ache he hadn't felt in years. He knew loneliness too. Not her kind, not exile under the threat of annihilation, but the quieter, more human kind. Empty dinners, silent rooms, nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if anyone in the world would ever truly see him. Now here she was, a being from beyond the stars who looked at him as if he were not just someone, but the only one. A sharp flicker broke through his thoughts. The ceiling light above them pulsed, flaring bright before dimming again. Jeremy blinked and glanced up. "What the hell?" "It is the bond," Helen interrupted softly, stepping closer. "When we are near, our energies collide. The world feels it, even if it cannot understand." Jeremy's skin prickled as she closed the distance between them. The air grew heavy, warm. He swore he could hear more than just his own heartbeat now. Another rhythm, steady, strong, aligning with his own. Thump, thump. His pulse stuttered, then adjusted, sinking to hers. It wasn't possible, but it was happening, undeniable. He gasped, pressing a hand against his chest. What is this?" She tilted her head, her luminous hair shifting like liquid fire. "Proof," she said simply, "that you are the one I was meant to find." Jeremy's legs threatened to give way beneath him. He sat down hard on the edge of his bed, running a hand through his hair. His mind screamed for reason, for logic, but the evidence was around him. The flickering lights, the charged air, the way his heart had surrendered its rhythm to hers, and the way he couldn't stop looking at her. "You're dangerous," he muttered, though his tone held no anger, only awe. Helen gave a quiet laugh, a sound so fragile it seemed out of place on her tongue. "Perhaps, but not to you." He stared at her for a long moment, his chest rising and falling too quickly. Finally he whispered, "Why me? Really, out of everyone on Earth, why me?" Her eyes softened, glowing less fiercely now, more like moonlight than fire. "Because you were the first to call to me. Do you not understand?" Out of countless voices, yours sang the loudest. The room felt different now, charged, alive. Jeremy stood motionless, his arm tingling where her hand had touched him, his chest still struggling to catch up with the rhythm she had imposed on his heart. He should have been afraid, should have shoved her away, should have screamed for help. Instead, he found himself staring at her with a pull he couldn't fight, as if some invisible thread had knotted itself between them. Helen let her hand linger for only a breath longer before withdrawing, her eyes clouded with something he couldn't quite name. Relief, perhaps, or sorrow, or both. She moved toward the window, her gaze lifting to the dark sky beyond the curtains. "My world," she began, her voice low, distant, "is not like yours. It is beautiful, yes, but beauty there is a prison. Every color, every star, every sound, controlled. Our lives are designed before we take our first breath. We are told who to serve, who to bond with, even the moment we must die." Jeremy swallowed, his throat dry. "That sounds like hell." Her lips twitched at the word, a faint smile ghosting across her face. "To us it is tradition. To me, it was suffocation. I was born into a family that prized obedience above all else. I should have bowed, I should have bent, but something in me resisted. Every command they gave me felt like a cage tightening around my soul. So I broke their rules. I dreamed of freedom." She turned, her glowing eyes locking onto his. "Do you know what they do to dreamers in my world, Jeremy?" He shook his head slowly. "They erase them. Not just their bodies, but their essence. They wipe every trace until it is as if the dreamer never existed at all. No memories, no history, no name whispered in mourning. Nothing. That was to be my fate." The words struck him like a blow. For a moment he forgot she wasn't human, forgot the strange glow of her skin, forgot the way the air bent around her. She was just someone who had been punished for wanting to live her own life. Someone who had clawed her way out of chains to stand in his room at midnight. Jeremy's chest tightened. "You were alone?" "Yes." Her voice cracked, the single syllable trembling with pain. "So terribly alone. Until I found you." He wanted to look away, to break free from the intensity of her gaze, but he couldn't. The weight of her confession pressed against him, and with it, something else rose inside him, an ache he hadn't felt in years. He knew loneliness too, not her kind, not exile under the threat of annihilation, but the quieter, more human kind. Empty dinners, silent rooms, nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if anyone in the world would ever truly see him. Now, here she was, a being from beyond the stars who looked at him as if he were not just someone, but the only one. A sharp flicker broke through his thoughts. The ceiling light above them pulsed, flaring bright before dimming again. Jeremy blinked and glanced up. "What the hell?" "It is the bond," Helen interrupted softly, stepping closer. "When we are near, our energies collide. The world feels it, even if it cannot understand." Jeremy's skin prickled as she closed the distance between them. The air grew heavy, warm. He swore he could hear more than just his own heartbeat now. Another rhythm, steady, strong, aligning with his own. Thump, thump. His pulse stuttered, then adjusted, sinking to hers. It wasn't possible, but it was happening. Undeniable. He gasped, pressing a hand against his chest. What is this?" She tilted her head, her luminous hair shifting like liquid fire. "Proof," she said simply, "that you are the one I was meant to find." Jeremy's legs threatened to give way beneath him. He sat down hard on the edge of his bed, running a hand through his hair. His mind screamed for reason, for logic. But the evidence was around him. The flickering lights, the charged air, the way his heart had surrendered its rhythm to hers, and the way he couldn't stop looking at her. "You're dangerous," he muttered, though his tone held no anger, only awe. Helen gave a quiet laugh, a sound so fragile it seemed out of place on her tongue. "Perhaps, but not to you." He stared at her for a long moment, his chest rising and falling too quickly. Finally he whispered, "Why me? Really, out of everyone on Earth, why me?" Her eyes softened, glowing less fiercely now, more like moonlight than fire. "Because you were the first to call to me. Do you not understand? Out of countless voices, yours sang the loudest. Your loneliness reached across the dark, and I heard it. We are both rebels, Jeremy. You against your silence, me against my chains. Alone we fade. Together we endure." Jeremy's throat tightened again. He didn't know if he believed in destiny, but her words dug into him, raw and undeniable. Another flicker of the light, this one sharper. Then for a heartbeat, the room itself seemed to slow. The second hand of the clock froze mid-tick. Jeremy blinked rapidly, his breath caught in his lungs as the air thickened around him like honey. He turned his head sluggishly, and even Helen seemed caught in the same slow tide. Then just as quickly, the world snapped back. Time rushed forward, the clock resuming its steady tick. Jeremy's heart slammed against his ribs. "What was that?" he demanded. Helen exhaled shakily. "The bond. Growing. It is dangerous when untethered. We are bleeding into the world around us." Jeremy's hands trembled against his knees. "If that's what happens, just being near you, what happens if this bond goes further?" Her silence was answer enough. For a long moment, neither spoke. Jeremy's mind spun, dizzy with fear, with awe, with a hunger he didn't dare name. And yet beneath it all, a new feeling took root, something protective, fierce. He didn't understand her world, her laws, her hunters, but he understood her eyes, the pain carved into them, the trembling in her voice when she spoke of being erased. He didn't want her to vanish. He didn't want to lose this strange, impossible connection that made him feel seen in a way no one else ever had. His thoughts were broken by a sudden noise, a faint hum, low and distant, drifting through the night beyond his window. It was faint, almost like the purr of machinery carried on the wind. Helen stiffened instantly, her body taut, her glow dimming. "They are near!" Jeremy's blood ran cold. "Who?" Her gaze snapped to his, hard and urgent. "The ones who hunt me." The hum deepened, vibrating through the air like a predator's growl. Jeremy felt it in his bones, in his teeth. Outside, the night no longer seemed empty. It pulsed with a presence, vast and terrifying. Helen took a step closer, her hand brushing his. Her touch was cold and burning at once. Do you see now, Jeremy? Do you understand why I begged you? Alone I cannot withstand them, but with you. The light above them flickered again, brighter this time, throwing their shadows long against the walls. Jeremy's heart thundered, not in fear alone, but in resolve beginning to bloom. Whatever this was, dream, destiny, or madness, he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't let her face it alone, and the bond between them, wild and dangerous, was only just beginning. The hum outside grew louder, a low vibration that crawled into Jeremy's bones. It wasn't the sound of cars or planes. This was deeper, resonant, unnatural. Helen's eyes flared brighter in alarm, and she moved quickly to the window, pulling the curtains aside just enough to look out. Jeremy rose on unsteady legs. "What do you see?" Her face tightened. "Hunters." The word alone carried the weight of death. Jeremy joined her, peering past her shoulder. At first he saw only the familiar street below, quiet and asleep beneath pools of streetlight. Then in the distance the shadows shifted. Shapes emerged, tall and fluid, cloaked in darkness that seemed to drink the light around them. They didn't walk. They glided, silent and inevitable, their forms flickering between solid and spectral. Jeremy's stomach clenched. "What the hell are they?" "My people's enforcers," Helen whispered. "They were sent to erase me. And now they found me." The nearest shape lifted its head. Even at a distance, Jeremy felt the weight of its gaze, cold, inhuman, stripping him bare. The hum thickened, filling the air with pressure until his ears rang. He stumbled back from the window. "We have to call someone, the police, the army, anybody." "They cannot help," Helen said sharply, turning to him. Her glow pulsed faintly, dimming under the gravity of fear. "Your weapons, your laws, nothing matters to them. Only one thing can protect me now," Jeremy's breath caught. "The bond." She nodded. "With you, I can resist them. Without you, I am already lost." The words rattled inside him, too enormous to process. He wanted to scream that he wasn't ready, that he was just a man with a messy apartment and an unremarkable life. But the look in her eyes, desperation and trust woven together, struck deeper than fear. Before he could answer, the window glass quivered. A ripple of force pressed against it, invisible yet undeniable. Jeremy's heart hammered as cracks spidered across the pane. Then with a shattering roar, the window exploded inward. Shards rained across the floor as the figures from outside stepped into his room, their forms condensing into solid shapes. They were tall, skeletal, their armor gleaming like liquid metal, faces hidden behind masks that glowed with pale symbols. Their voices came as one, layered and cold. "Helen of Aloria, you are to return. You are not permitted to bond with this creature." Jeremy's blood ran cold. Creature. They didn't even see him as human. Just an obstacle. Helen stepped in front of him, her glow flickering defiantly. "I will not go back. I choose him." The tallest of the hunters tilted its head. The symbols across its mask flared brighter, a pulse of disdain. "A human? You defile your bloodline with inferiors. You will obey." Jeremy's fists clenched. The words seared into him. Inferior. He wanted to shrink under their gaze, to admit they were right, that he was nothing compared to beings who crossed galaxies. But something rose inside him, stronger than fear. Rage. He stepped out from behind Helen, voice shaking but steady. "She's not going anywhere." The hunters turned their heads toward him in unison. The room grew colder, the air sharp enough to sting his lungs. The tallest hunter extended a hand, and Jeremy felt his body seize as if invisible chains had wrapped around his chest. He dropped to one knee, gasping, unable to breathe. Helen cried out and rushed to him, placing her hands on his shoulders. The moment she touched him, the pressure weakened. Light sparked between their bodies, small at first, then growing, crackling across the floor like lightning. The hunters recoiled slightly, their masks flickering. One of them hissed, voice layered with static. "Unformed bond. Dangerous. Contain it." Jeremy sucked in a breath as the pressure lifted. His chest burned, but energy surged inside him, wild and electric. He grabbed Helen's hand, gripping it tightly. What do we do? He rasped. Trust me, she whispered, her glow swelling brighter. And trust yourself. The hunters advanced, their hands lifting. Dark energy coiled around their arms like smoke. Jeremy felt the instinct to run, to hide. But Helen's hand anchored him. Her glow spread into him, filling his veins, synchronizing with the frantic beat of his heart. The lights in the room flared, every bulb burning too bright, shadows shrinking into corners. Jeremy's fear blurred into something else. Power. His body shook, but he didn't let go of her. The tallest hunter unleashed its energy, a dark wave rushing toward them. Jeremy braced, but instead of consuming him, the energy met the glow surrounding them and shattered. The room trembled, walls rattling, as light burst outward in a sphere, blasting the hunters backward. Jeremy gasped, his whole body alive with heat. What? What was that? The bond, Helen said, her voice steady despite the chaos. It grows stronger with defiance. The hunters struggled to their feet, their masks cracked, their voices distorted. Impossible! A human cannot withstand. Then maybe you've underestimated us, Jeremy spat, his fear replaced by a strange courage. The hunters lunged again, but Jeremy and Helen stood together. Their hands tightened, their hearts pounding in perfect unison. The glow around them surged brighter, blinding, until it swallowed the room in pure light. A roar of energy exploded outward, slamming into the hunters with unstoppable force. The walls shook, the floor vibrated, and the alien enforcers were hurled back through the shattered window. Outside, their forms dissolved into the night, retreating, their hum fading into silence. The light dimmed slowly, leaving only the wreckage of Jeremy's room, shattered glass, scorched walls, the smell of ozone heavy in the air. Jeremy collapsed to his knees, chest heaving, his hands still gripping Helen's. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the ticking of the clock filled the silence. Finally, Jeremy lifted his head, staring at her through sweat and exhaustion. I'm not supposed to be able to do that. Helen knelt beside him, her glow softening into something gentle, tender. You are more than you believe. That is why I chose you. Not because you are perfect, not because you are strong, but because you are willing. Jeremy swallowed hard, emotion swelling in his chest. He had never felt smaller, yet never more alive. Ordinary no longer fit him. He was part of something larger, something terrifying and beautiful. But even as he caught his breath, a shadow lingered in the back of his mind. This was only the beginning. The hunters would not give up. And if tonight proved anything, it was that standing with Helen meant stepping into a war he barely understood. Still, when he looked at her, her glowing eyes fixed on him with fierce trust, Jeremy knew one thing with unshakable certainty. He wasn't going to let her face it alone. The silence after the storm was heavier than the storm itself. Jeremy's room lay in ruins, shards of glass glinting on the floor, the walls scorched with strange burns, the curtains fluttering in the night air that blew in from the broken window. Jeremy sat on the floor, his chest rising and falling, lungs still burning from the power that had ripped through him. His hand remained locked in Helen's, as though letting go would undo everything they had just survived. Helen's glow had softened now, no longer blazing like a star, but shimmering faintly, tenderly, like moonlight on the still water. Her face was pale with exhaustion, yet her eyes shone with something fierce, something that made Jeremy forget the wreckage around them. They'll come back, he whispered, his voice hoarse. You said they don't stop. They won't, she admitted, her voice quiet but resolute. But it doesn't matter. Not anymore, Jeremy frowned. What do you mean? She turned to him, both hands wrapping around his now, holding him as if he were the only anchor left in her universe. I've made my choice. I will not run anymore. I will not hide. I stay with you. The words hit him harder than the hunter's energy had. He stared at her, searching her face for any doubt, any hesitation. But there was none. Only conviction. Only trust. Jeremy's throat tightened. If you stay, you'll never be safe. Not here. Not anywhere. Then let me be unsafe, Helen replied, her tone firm yet soft, a paradox only she could embody. I would rather face danger beside you than live in a cage of safety without you. His chest ached at her words. He thought of his life before tonight. Quiet, small, forgettable. The loneliness that haunted him like a shadow. And now here was this woman, this being from a world beyond imagination, offering him something he had never dared hope for. Not just love, but purpose. He exhaled shakily, a laugh slipping out despite himself. You've ruined me, you know that? I can't go back to who I was. Not after this. Her lips curved faintly, her glow warming. Good. You were never meant to go back. Jeremy leaned against the wall, closing his eyes for a moment. The fatigue was crushing, but beneath it ran a current of exhilaration. His body hummed with energy not his own, his heart still beating in perfect sync with hers. Ordinary was gone. He was changed, and strangely, he didn't mourn it. When he opened his eyes again, she was watching him closely, as if memorizing every detail of his face. He reached up, brushing his thumb along her cheek. Her skin was cool, but sparks danced beneath his touch, soft pulses of light that traveled across her markings. You're really staying, he said, not as a question, but as a truth he was finally ready to accept. I am yours, she said simply. Not as surrender, but as declaration. The words wrapped around him, terrifying and beautiful. He pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. For a moment, everything else faded. The broken window, the threat of her hunters, the unknown future. There was only her breath mingling with his, her glow seeping into his darkness, her presence filling the empty spaces he had carried for so long. Outside, the wind stirred the trees. Above, the stars stretched endless and silent. Jeremy glanced past her, through the shattered frame of the window. The night sky sprawled open, galaxies hidden just beyond human sight. He had always looked at the stars as distant things, unreachable, but now he held one in his arms. We'll have to fight, he murmured. We'll have to hide. We'll have to survive. Together, Helen said. That is all that matters. He let the words settle inside him. Together. It was enough. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the faint ticking of the clock that had survived the chaos, marking the ordinary minutes in an extraordinary night. Jeremy found himself wondering what tomorrow would look like. Would the hunters return at dawn? Would Helen's presence bend the world around them until it broke? Would Earth itself one day learn the truth of what had come crashing into his room? He didn't know, but for the first time in years, uncertainty didn't scare him. It thrilled him. Finally, Helen rose to her feet, tugging gently at his hand. Come, she whispered. Where? She smiled, soft and radiant. Outside, the stars wait. Jeremy followed her out through the broken frame, stepping barefoot into the cool night. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain. Above them, the sky was vast, untouched by the violence that had just shaken his world. They stood side by side on the grass, hands intertwined. Her glow bathed them in silver light, blending with the starlight above, until it was impossible to tell where Earth ended and the cosmos began. Jeremy tilted his head back, staring up. He had done this 1,000 times before, but tonight was different. Tonight, the stars didn't feel distant. They felt alive, watching, waiting, and he wasn't alone beneath them anymore. He turned to Helen, studying the way her hair shimmered like molten fire, the way her markings pulsed gently as though echoing the constellations. Her eyes met his, unflinching, unwavering. In that moment, Jeremy understood. He wasn't just a man anymore. He was a keeper of something greater than himself, a cosmic bond, a love that defied galaxies. The thought was terrifying, but it was also the most beautiful truth he had ever known. He squeezed her hand, grounding himself. You didn't just fall into my room that night. The ordinary man and the exiled starborn woman, together, always.